A small-town teacher, a soldier with a lion's heart, a family dinner that becomes an ambush. Christina thought love had finally given her a home until the door closed and the knives came out. Whispers sharpened into accusations, tradition twisted into control, and a mother's smile broke into a slap. With a phone held hostage and a camera rolling, humiliation becomes a weapon, until boots hit the marble and Jason walks in. Truth lights the fuse. Secrets unravel. Consequences thunder through a town that thought it knew the Williams name. This isn't a story about breaking, it's about choosing who you become after. Grace doesn't mean surrender, it means rising. Hello, I never thought a family dinner could nearly destroy me. My name is Christina, I'm 32 years old, and I'm a third-grade teacher in a small town just outside Fort Benning. My life used to be simple. Lesson plans, sticky-fingered kids hugging me after class, evenings spent grading papers at my kitchen table. And then I met Jason. It wasn't just love at first sight, it was lightning in a bottle. Jason was everything I didn't even know I was searching for. An Army captain, decorated for bravery, with the kind of quiet confidence that comes from leading men through war zones. He was strong, yes, but he also had this softness, this kindness that lived in the crinkle of his eyes when he smiled. We met by chance at a backyard barbecue. I almost didn't go. I had a stack of essays to grade, but fate clearly had other plans. Jason walked up to me, handed me a drink, and said with that lopsided grin, "This was meant for someone else, but I suddenly can't." "Remember who?" I laughed, and something inside me shifted. That night we talked for hours, the kind of conversation where time doesn't just fly, it disappears completely. Within months, we were inseparable. We dreamed about buying a little farm one day, away from the noise of the world. We shared a love of old black and white films, quiet walks, and long talks about life's biggest questions. When Jason proposed, I said yes through tears of joy, thinking life couldn't possibly get more perfect. But perfection has shadows. The moment I met his family, I sensed it. His father, retired General Robert Williams, greeted me with the rigid politeness of a man who had spent his entire life in command. His mother, Barbara, sharp, elegant, the kind of woman who could command a country club luncheon with a single glance, smiled at me, but it never reached her eyes. Jason's sister Vanessa hugged me too stiffly, her perfume overwhelming. His brother Eric barely lifted his head from his phone, smirking like he already knew something I didn't. Jason told me not to worry. "They'll come around," he promised. "They're protective. After what happened with my ex, they just need time." I believed him. I wanted to believe him. At our wedding, an extravagant affair Barbara insisted on hosting at their country club, those cracks widened. I overheard Barbara whisper to a friend, "She's sweet, but teachers don't last in military marriages." And her family background? So modest. The words stung, but I smiled through the pain. Jason defended me whenever he caught the digs. "Mom, Christina grew up in a military family too. She knows this life better than most." But the whispers never stopped. The sideways comments. The subtle questions about whether I'd keep working once Jason and I had children. When Jason deployed for 9 months, I told myself I'd be strong. He kissed me the night before he left and whispered, "Don't let them get to you, Christina. You're my home, my family." I clung to those words like oxygen. For months, I kept my distance from the Williams family. Then last week, Barbara called me. Her voice was warmer than I'd ever heard it. "Darling, we haven't seen you in ages. We miss you. Why don't you come for dinner on Friday? Just family. I'll make Jason's favorite pot roast." Something inside me dared to hope. Maybe, finally, the tide had turned. Maybe absence had softened their hearts. I bought a beautiful photo frame, slipped in Jason's latest picture in uniform, and chose a blue dress Jason always loved. As I drove up to their mansion, grand, intimidating, dripping with old money elegance, I told myself this would be a new beginning. But I was wrong. What waited for me inside that dining room wasn't reconciliation. It was an ambush. When Barbara Williams called me that Tuesday afternoon, I almost didn't pick up. Her number flashing across my phone usually meant a polite but perfunctory check-in, or worse, a veiled criticism wrapped in sugar. But that day her tone was different, warmer, softer. "Christina, darling," she said, stretching out the word like honey, "we haven't seen you in ages. We miss you. And Jason, of course. Would you come to dinner Friday night?" Just family. I'm making Jason's favorite pot roast. I froze for a moment, phone pressed to my ear, waiting for the inevitable sting behind the sweetness. But none came. Instead, there was a pause, almost as if she were nervous. Something fluttered in my chest. Could this be it? The olive branch I had been waiting for all these years? I'd love to, I answered cautiously. Wonderful, Barbara replied, satisfaction crackling just beneath her velvet tone. 7 o'clock sharp. You know how the general likes punctuality. When the call ended, I sat in silence, clutching the phone, unsure whether to cry from relief or brace for the next attack. For the first time since Jason left for deployment, I felt a surge of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this family dinner would be a turning point. I spent the next few days preparing with the kind of nervous energy reserved for job interviews or first dates. I picked out a gift that I thought would touch them. A custom engraved photo frame, polished silver, with Jason's latest portrait in uniform. He was smiling, his eyes crinkled at the corners, his bravery and warmth captured in one frozen moment. I wanted them to see what I saw every time I looked at him, the man, not just the soldier. On Friday evening, I stood in front of my mirror for nearly an hour, smoothing the skirt of my blue dress, the one Jason always complimented. I curled my hair just so, applied makeup carefully, and slipped on modest pearl earrings. I wanted to look polished but approachable, respectable but warm. As I drove across town, past neat suburbs that slowly gave way to sprawling estates, my heart pounded. The Williams mansion loomed ahead, 3 stories of southern grandeur with columns that seemed to sneer down at visitors. The iron gates swung open automatically, as if swallowing me whole. Relax, I whispered to myself. This is a chance. Barbara greeted me at the door, her smile as practiced as ever, but she pulled me into a brief hug that caught me off guard. Christina, you look lovely, she said smoothly, her eyes flicking up and down my dress with an appraisal that felt more like inspection. Thank you for inviting me, I replied, holding out the gift bag. I brought something for the family. How thoughtful, Barbara said, taking the bag but setting it aside without opening it. Come in, everyone's waiting in the dining room. The house smelled faintly of polish and perfume, with the underlying richness of roast beef wafting from the kitchen. My heels clicked against the marble floor as I followed her into the dining room. The table was immaculate, china with gold trim, crystal glasses sparkling beneath the chandelier, silverware lined up with military precision. General Williams sat at the head, posture rigid, expression unreadable. He gave me a curt nod. Vanessa offered a smile that was tight and insincere, while Eric didn't bother to look up from his phone. You look comfortable, Vanessa remarked, her gaze raking over me. It was a single word, but the way she said it made my skin prickle. Comfortable. As though I were underdressed. As though my very presence disrupted their curated image. I sat down, clasping my hands in my lap to hide the slight tremor in my fingers. I reminded myself of Jason's words before deployment. Don't let them get to you. They'll come around. Dinner began stiffly. General Williams asked about my teaching job as though it were a hobby, his tone flat. And how is the pay these days for teachers? He asked, slicing into his salad with mechanical precision. It's modest, I admitted, but rewarding. I love working with children. He exchanged a glance with Barbara. And your parents? He asked, his voice sharper now. My mother still lives in Arizona, I said softly. My father passed away 2 years ago. How quaint, Vanessa interrupted, that little bungalow you showed us pictures of. Charming to stay in one place so long. I swallowed hard, forcing a smile. Every question felt like a dagger disguised as curiosity, each answer twisted into an insult. Barbara leaned back in her chair, sipping her wine. Jason emailed us about his unit's community work. It was so detailed. I'm surprised he didn't share the same with you. Her implication cut deep. I smiled tightly. Communication during deployment can be limited. I'm grateful for any contact we have. Halfway through the main course, my phone buzzed in my purse. Normally, I would have ignored it, but with Jason overseas, every vibration made my heart leap. Excuse me, it might be Jason, I said, standing quickly. Barbara's eyes narrowed, but she nodded. I stepped into the hallway and answered, only to hear a colleague asking about lesson plans. As I ended the call, ready to return, I froze. From the dining room came my name. She really thinks she's fooled him, Vanessa sneered. The gold digger actually believes Jason will stay with her, Barbara hissed. But when he gets back, we'll make him see reason. A good divorce lawyer will erase this mistake. Eric's voice joined in, gleeful. I've already started gathering evidence, her debts, her background. Jason will thank us when this is over. My chest tightened. My pulse thundered in my ears. For years I had suspected they didn't accept me. But hearing the venom behind their smiles, the cold calculation of their plan, shattered any illusion of civility. I wanted to run. Grab my purse, leave, and never look back. But something inside me hardened. No, I thought, I won't let them twist this. I won't let them define me. I straightened my shoulders, blinked back tears, and stepped back into the dining room. The sudden silence when I entered told me everything I needed to know. 4 pairs of eyes turned toward me, and for the first time I didn't feel small. I felt ready. When I walked back into the dining room, the atmosphere was electric, thick, heavy, charged with the kind of silence that feels louder than shouting. Their words still echoed in my ears. Gold digger, divorce, evidence. Barbara looked up first, her face arranged into that smooth, flawless mask she had perfected over decades of country club luncheons. Everything all right, dear? She asked, her voice sugared, but her eyes sharp as glass. I forced myself to meet her gaze. Actually, I said, my voice steadier than I expected, I think we need to clear the air. I overheard some things, hurtful things, and I'd rather we address them openly. The silence deepened. Vanessa stiffened. Eric slid his phone into his pocket a second too late, and even General Williams paused mid-bite, fork frozen in the air. Oh, Christina, Barbara said with a tinkling laugh, dismissive as a swat at a mosquito. I'm not sure what you think you heard, but I can assure you it was a misunderstanding. My heart was pounding, but my resolve was firm. I heard you call me a gold digger. I heard you talk about pushing Jason into a divorce when he comes home. And I heard Eric say he's been gathering evidence against me. Vanessa barked out a sharp laugh. Wow, paranoid much? We were discussing a television show. If you're going to eavesdrop, at least get the context right. I shook my head. No, I know what I heard. And I understand you don't approve of me, but I married Jason because I love him. Not for money, not for status. Oh, please. Eric finally looked up from his phone, his smirk dripping with contempt. A small-town teacher from a middle-class family just happens to snag one of the most eligible army captains in the state, right after his promotion? Do the math. I felt heat rise in my chest. I didn't even know about his promotion when we got engaged. And I have my own savings. I've never asked Jason or any of you for a single dime. General Williams cleared his throat, his voice low and measured, like he was delivering orders at a briefing. Young lady, you must understand our position. The Williams family carries a certain standing. Jason has a promising career ahead. We simply want to protect him from impulsive decisions. Impulsive? I repeated, incredulous. We dated for 9 months before we got engaged. We've been married for 4 years. That's hardly impulsive. Barbara leaned forward now, her smile gone, her tone sharper. 4 years during which he's been deployed twice. Men idealize what they leave behind when they're away. But when Jason returns, he'll see clearly. He already does, I said firmly, pulling out my phone. Just yesterday he texted me, telling me how much he loves me and how he can't wait to come home to me. I scrolled quickly, showing them the glowing words Jason had. Sent. Counting the days until I can hold you again. You are my heart, my home, my everything. 4 more weeks. Barbara's face twisted, and in one startling movement she snatched the phone from my hand. These could easily be faked, she snapped. Anyone can text themselves from a second phone. Don't insult our intelligence. Give me back my phone, I demanded, standing. Or what? Vanessa sneered. Going to call the cops on your mother-in-law for looking at some suspicious texts? Those are private messages between me and my husband, I said, reaching across the table. Barbara turned, passing the phone smoothly to Eric. He pocketed it with a smug smile. We'll just hang on to this until we can verify it's really from Jason. Something inside me snapped. This is ridiculous, I said, my voice shaking with fury. You have no right to take my property or accuse me of lying. We have every right, Barbara retorted, rising to her feet. Her imposing frame towered over me as her voice dripped venom. We are his family. His real family. You wormed your way in here, but you don't belong. I am his wife, I shot back, though my throat was tightening with fear, whether you accept it or not. A temporary situation, General Williams added coldly. One that will be corrected. They were closing in, Barbara standing, Vanessa sliding her chair back, Eric grinning like he was watching the best comedy of his life. The walls of the grand dining room suddenly felt suffocating, the chandelier's light blinding, the polished mahogany table turning into a battlefield. I think I should leave, I said, trying to edge toward the hallway. Please return my phone. Barbara stepped in front of me, blocking my path. Her perfume was suffocating. Not until you listen to what we have to say, she hissed. She began listing everything they'd uncovered about me. My father's gambling debts before he died, my student loans, the fact that I had been living paycheck to paycheck before meeting Jason. Yes, I admitted, my voice breaking but firm. And Jason knows all of it. I've never hidden my past from him. None of that changes why I married him. Stop the innocent act, Vanessa spat, her eyes flashing with cruelty. Women like you are all the same. You saw an opportunity and grabbed it. Tears stung my eyes, but I blinked them back. I need to leave, I whispered. Barbara moved closer, lowering her voice to a menacing growl. Not until you agree to a divorce, quietly, when Jason comes home. We'll make it worth your while. Enough money to pay off your debts and disappear, far from here. It was bribery, blatant and cruel. I straightened my shoulders, my body trembling, but my words like steel. I will never take your money, and I will never leave Jason, unless he asks me to, which he won't, because unlike you, he knows who I really am. The room went silent for half a beat, and then the storm broke. The moment I refused their so-called deal, Barbara's face twisted into something monstrous, her polished society mask torn away to reveal pure rage. You ungrateful little girl, she hissed, her voice trembling with venom. And before I could react, her hand whipped across my face with a crack so sharp it echoed through the grand dining room like a gunshot. Pain exploded across my cheek. My body lurched backward, crashing into the cold, unforgiving wall. The chandelier above swayed slightly, its crystals jingling like cruel applause. For a heartbeat, the shock paralyzed me. This was Jason's mother. A woman I had endured subtle jabs from for years, but never, not once, had I imagined she would hit me. How dare you speak to me like that in my own home? Barbara growled, her chest rising and falling with fury. My cheek burned as I pressed my hand against it, still unable to process what had just happened. And then, before I could take a breath, Vanessa stepped forward. Her eyes were blazing with contempt, her lips curled in a smirk that made my stomach churn. You think you're strong? You think you're better than us? She sneered. Then, with a deliberate cruelty that made my blood run cold, she leaned in close and spat in my face. The warm, vile wetness slid down my cheek, mixing with the tears that had finally broken through. I froze, humiliated beyond words. Gold digger? She spat again, the word dripping with hatred. At that, Eric burst out laughing, a deep, mocking laugh that filled the room. He whipped his phone back out and pointed it directly at me. Oh, this is priceless, he chuckled, his thumb already pressing record. The guys at the club are gonna love this. Poor little Christina, crying like a baby. The humiliation cut deeper than the slap. I wiped at my face with shaking hands, smearing tears and spit across my skin, wishing I could crawl out of my own body. You are nothing, Barbara continued, her voice low and venomous. She loomed over me, her finger pointed inches from my face. A nobody who thought she could elevate herself by catching a Williams man. Let me make this perfectly clear, Christina. You will never be good enough for my son. Never. I looked desperately around the table, searching for some trace of humanity, but there was none. Vanessa's smile was cruel. Eric's laughter rang in my ears, and even General Williams, the man who had commanded respect from hundreds of soldiers, sat still, silent, his expression cold. His silence was an approval more cutting than Barbara's slap. You're disgusting, Vanessa added, her tone icy. Jason will be embarrassed when he finds out who you really are. That's a lie, I whispered through trembling lips. Jason knows me. He knows my heart. I have never betrayed him. Eric tilted his phone for a better angle, sneering. Your word against ours. Who's he gonna believe? The family who raised him? Or the woman who showed up conveniently right before his promotion? My chest heaved as panic surged through me. Not only had they assaulted me, they were planning to destroy me, to twist the narrative and make me look like the monster. I straightened up, even though my body trembled violently. I'm leaving, I said, my voice shaking but firm. Keep the phone if you want. Jason knows the truth. I tried to step past Barbara, but once again she moved to block me. Her perfume, heavy and suffocating, filled my lungs like poison. Always the victim, she sneered. This is nothing compared to what will happen if you fight us. We have resources, Christina. Connections you can't even imagine. You'll regret ever stepping into this family. Vanessa leaned in, her breath hot against my ear. Do you really think you can win against us? She whispered. This isn't a competition. You're already finished. My legs shook, but I forced myself to hold my ground. This isn't about winning. This is about love. And Jason knows who I am. He always will. Eric snorted, zooming in with his camera. Oh, that's perfect. Keep going. The whole world's gonna love this sob story. At that moment, something inside me broke. Not my strength, but the illusion that there was any line they wouldn't cross. These weren't just insults anymore. This was violence, calculated humiliation, a psychological assault crafted to crush me completely. And for a moment, they nearly succeeded. I was backed into the wall, spit still drying on my cheek, Barbara's fingers stabbing the air like a dagger, Vanessa smirking, Eric recording, and General Williams, silence pressing down like a weight on my chest. Tears blurred my vision, but behind the blur came a sound. The sound of the front door opening, the creak of heavy footsteps in the hall. None of them noticed, too consumed by their own cruelty. You'll regret the day you ever met my son, Barbara hissed. But then, a voice cut through the chaos like a blade of ice. What exactly is going on here? Deep, commanding, terrifyingly familiar. And in that instant, everything changed. The dining room froze as the words rang out. What exactly is going on here? I whipped my head toward the doorway, heart pounding so hard it drowned out every other sound. There he was, Jason. Still in his dusty combat uniform, boots unlaced from travel, rucksack slung over one shoulder. His face was unreadable, eyes scanning the room with a sharpness honed by years in the military. His gaze lingered on me, my tear-streaked face, the red bloom spreading across my cheek. Then shifted to Barbara's raised hand, Vanessa's sneer, Eric's phone still aimed at me, and finally his father's cold silence. For a moment, no one moved. It was as though the walls themselves were holding their breath. Jason, Barbara exclaimed, her voice instantly transformed into syrupy sweetness. She rushed forward, arms outstretched. What a wonderful surprise! We had no idea you were coming home today. Jason raised a hand. Don't move. His voice was low, but sharp as steel. Barbara stopped mid-step, her fake smile faltering. I want to understand, Jason said slowly, deliberately, exactly what I just walked in on. I could see the panic ripple across their faces. Vanessa glanced nervously at her mother. Eric lowered his phone with a guilty jerk. Even the general straightened in his chair, as if suddenly back at attention before a superior officer. Barbara's voice wavered but tried to hold its mask. It was just a little family disagreement. Christina got emotional. She misunderstood something we said and lashed out. I opened my mouth to protest, but Jason's eyes flicked to me, silently telling me to wait. Is that so? He asked, turning his gaze on Eric. And you were recording this disagreement because? Eric stammered. I thought we might need, clarity later. Jason repeated the word, his tone flat. Clarity! His jaw tightened, but he didn't look away. Dad, what's your version? The general cleared his throat. Son, this is a complicated situation. Maybe we should talk about it privately, man to man. Jason's voice hardened. No, I think I've missed enough of these family discussions. Vanessa, anything you'd like to add? Vanessa folded her arms, her voice sharp. Christina was being hysterical, you know how she gets. We were just trying to calm her down. Jason turned to me at last. His eyes softened, but his voice stayed steady. Christina, what happened? The dam inside me broke. My voice shook, but I spoke with everything I had left. They invited me for dinner. I overheard them calling me a gold digger, planning to convince you to divorce me. When I confronted them, your mother slapped me, Vanessa spat on me, and Eric filmed it while laughing. Barbara gasped theatrically. She's lying, Jason. You can't possibly believe. Stop talking. Jason's command cracked like a whip. I was standing outside that door for the last 5 minutes. I heard and saw everything. The color drained from Barbara's face. Vanessa looked like she might faint. Eric's knuckles whitened around his phone. Did I misunderstand you slapping my wife? Jason demanded, his voice trembling with contained fury. Did I misunderstand Vanessa spitting in her face? Did I misunderstand the threats about making her life difficult? About editing evidence? Silence. The only sound was the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner, marking each second of their downfall. Jason took a step forward, his presence filling the room. My deployment was delayed last minute. I thought I'd surprise everyone with good news. Turns out I'm the one who got the surprise. Son, the general began again. No, Jason snapped, his control finally cracking. This woman is my wife. The woman I love, the woman I chose, and you assaulted her in your home. Barbara tried one last time. It was hardly assault. Tell that to the security cameras I installed last Christmas. Jason cut her off coldly. Every head jerked upward toward the chandelier, where a small black lens nestled among the crystals. Eric went pale. Vanessa's mouth fell open. Barbara staggered back a step. You recorded us? Vanessa whispered in horror. Jason nodded. After Mom insisted the silver had gone missing, I put them in every common room. Turns out they captured something far more valuable tonight. Everything you did, every word you said. The air went heavy with panic. Jason walked to me then, gently cupping my bruised cheek, his thumb wiping away a stray tear. Are you okay? He whispered. I nodded, though my body shook. They took my phone, I whispered. Jason turned sharply. Eric, hand it over. Eric hesitated, then fumbled in his pocket and slapped it into Jason's palm. Jason slid my phone back into my purse, then slung the strap over my shoulder and wrapped his arm protectively around me. We're leaving, he announced. But before we go, let's make something crystal clear. He turned back to them, his voice ice. Christina is my wife, my family, my priority. What you did tonight crossed every line. I have never been more ashamed to carry the Williams name than I am right now. Barbara began to cry, desperate now. Jason, please. We were only trying to do what's best for you. Jason's eyes burned with anger. No, you were trying to protect an image. You never bothered to know Christina, to see what I see, to respect the woman I chose. You showed me exactly who you are tonight. His father remained silent, his rigid posture collapsing into defeat. Jason guided me to the door, his arm like a shield around me. He paused only once more, his back straight, his voice like a final order. I'll be reviewing the footage, I'll be filing a police report, and I'll be contacting my lawyer. What happens next will depend entirely on your choices. But understand this. He glanced back, his gaze like fire. I will always choose her. Every time. And with that, we walked out into the cool night air, leaving the Williams family frozen in their own shame. For the first time all evening, I felt safe. The night Jason pulled me out of that house, I thought the worst was over. I was wrong. In truth, it was only the beginning. The next morning, Jason kept his promise. He downloaded the security footage straight from the hidden cameras in the Williams mansion. We sat together at our small kitchen table as the video played back. Barbara's hand connecting with my face, Vanessa spitting on me, Eric laughing while recording, and the venomous threats they hurled like knives. Watching it made me shake all over again. But this time, I wasn't alone. Jason's arm was around me the entire time, steady and protective, his jaw clenched in anger. Christina, he said firmly, we're going to the police, today. At the station, the desk sergeant raised his eyebrows when Jason, still in uniform, requested to file an assault report against his own family. But when the officers reviewed the footage, their skepticism evaporated. A female officer gently photographed the bruise on my cheek, which had darkened overnight, and noted the redness still faintly visible on my skin. This isn't a family squabble, she said quietly. This is assault, and it's documented. By noon, we had filed the report and submitted paperwork for emergency restraining orders against Barbara, Vanessa, Eric, and yes, even General Williams, whose silence had been as damning as their cruelty. The judge granted them quickly. For the first time since that dinner, I could breathe. But then, Jason's phone buzzed. He glanced down, his face hardening. Eric posted a clip online. My stomach dropped. What? Jason turned the screen toward me. It was an edited version of the dinner, cut to make it look like I was the aggressor. Raising my voice, stepping forward, while the slap, the spit, and their threats were conveniently missing. Worse, Eric had tagged military spouses, mutual friends, and community leaders. I felt sick. They're going to believe him. Jason shook his head, calm but cold. No, he just buried himself. Within hours, Eric's video was blowing up, but not the way he intended. Military spouses who knew editing tricks called it out immediately. Where's the rest of the footage? One commented. Why does the clip suddenly jump? Another asked. The accusations piled up, and soon people were demanding the full recording. Laura, the wife of Jason's platoon sergeant, messaged me privately. We've got your back, don't worry. That night, Jason sat across from Major Harrison, his commanding officer, and played the full footage. I braced myself for judgment, for doubt. But when the video ended, Major Harrison's face was grave, his voice unwavering. This behavior is unacceptable, regardless of who is involved, he said. Captain Williams, your career will not suffer for protecting your wife. If anything, this proves your integrity. I nearly cried from relief. For weeks, Jason's family had painted me as a liability, a threat to his standing. Hearing the opposite, from someone who mattered, lifted a weight I didn't even realize I was still carrying. But the fallout for the Williams family was just beginning. The district attorney's office opened an investigation. Assault charges, conspiracy, even possible witness tampering. Because of the doctored video Eric posted, Barbara and Vanessa tried to backpedal, claiming it was just a misunderstanding. The general wrote Jason a stiff letter, insisting they had only been trying to protect him. But the evidence spoke louder than their excuses. In the community, the backlash was swift. The Williams name, once synonymous with prestige, was suddenly whispered with disgust. Barbara's bridge club disinvited her. Vanessa's volunteer organization asked her to step down to avoid negative attention. Eric lost an internship opportunity when his potential employer saw the online scandal. Meanwhile, messages of support poured in for me. Parents from my school sent flowers. Neighbors left casseroles on our doorstep. Military spouses I barely knew messaged to say, "We stand with you." One evening, Laura stopped by with her husband. She hugged me tightly and said, "They underestimated you, Christina. And they underestimated all of us. You're not alone." For the first time in months, I felt not just defended, but truly seen. Of course, the Williams family didn't go quietly. Barbara sent a long, teary letter calling me, quote, manipulative, and accusing me of turning Jason against his blood. Vanessa tried to claim her spit was just an accident. Eric insisted his video was a joke taken out of context. But none of it mattered anymore. Their words had lost all power. Jason looked at me one night, his hand covering mine. They've shown us who they are, and now the world knows too. He was right. The Williams family had tried to humiliate me, destroy me, erase me. Instead, they had exposed themselves. And I was still standing. The legal battle was exhausting, but the real fight, the one inside me, was only just beginning. On the outside, the bruises faded within weeks. Makeup could hide the last traces of Barbara's slap. The welt from Vanessa's spit had washed away with tears. But inside, the humiliation replayed itself every night like a broken film reel. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, hearing the echo of Eric's laughter, feeling Barbara's hand crashing against my cheek all over again. Jason never once left my side. In the first weeks, he set alarms so he could wake me from nightmares before they spiraled too deep. He came to every therapy session I asked him to, holding my hand when the words felt too heavy to say alone. Sometimes he didn't speak at all, just sat there, shoulders broad and steady, letting me lean against him until my breathing calmed. Family doesn't treat family that way, he whispered one night when I broke down, guilt gnawing at me for being the reason he now carried this shame tied to his last name. You are my family. You're the only family that matters. Still, the damage was there. Even going to the grocery store became a test of courage. I worried people had seen Eric's doctored video, worried they were whispering, "There's that gold digger. There's the woman who ruined the Williams name." But something unexpected happened. Support showed up in small, powerful ways. Neighbors I barely knew stopped me on walks, saying, "Good for you, standing up for yourself." A parent at school pressed a note into my hand that read, "You remind me to be strong too." The military spouses group, once intimidating, welcomed me with open arms. They knew the unspoken struggles of in-laws, of community pressure, of being treated as less than because you didn't come from the right family. Through them, I found my voice again. Therapy helped too. Dr. Mason, a trauma specialist, told me something that stuck. What happened to you is not who you are, but what you do with it can shape who you become. So I began to shape. Instead of hiding, I leaned into helping others. I started speaking at the military spouse support meetings. First, just telling my story, then listening to theirs. Women who had been silenced for years began opening up. About controlling in-laws. About being dismissed. About the pain of feeling invisible. The more I listened, the more I realized my pain wasn't isolating me. It was connecting me. Jason, for his part, carried his own scars. One night, weeks after the incident, I found him sitting outside in the dark, staring at nothing. When I asked what was wrong, he said quietly, "I keep replaying it. Walking in and seeing you like that. What if I had been 5 minutes later? What if I hadn't come home that night at all?" I wrapped my arms around him, feeling the weight of his fear. "You did come home," I whispered. "And because of that, I'm safe. We can't live in the what-ifs. We can only build from what is." And build, we did. 6 months after that night, I felt strong enough to return to teaching. But instead of my old classroom, I accepted a position on base, teaching children of military families. These kids carried invisible weight too. Their parents gone on deployments, their lives uprooted by moves every couple of years. I understood them in a way I hadn't before, and they understood me more than I expected. One little girl, whose father had just deployed, drew me a picture of a house with the words "Safe Here" written above it. I pinned it to my desk as a reminder. Even after destruction, safety could be rebuilt. Jason and I also made intentional choices about boundaries. The restraining orders gave us legal distance from his family. But emotionally, it was harder. Letters came, apologies from his father, excuses from Barbara, silence from Eric. Jason read them when he needed to, but he never pressured me to. "This is our life now," he told me one evening, his hand resting on mine as we watched the sunset from our small porch. "We get to decide who's in it and who isn't." For the first time, I believed him. Recovery wasn't a straight line. There were setbacks. Panic attacks when a man raised his voice in public. Sudden waves of shame when I remembered, the spit dripping down my cheek. But each time, I found ways to steady myself. With Jason. With therapy. With the support group. With the community that had chosen me, not because of blood, but because of shared strength. What I learned was this: healing isn't about forgetting. It's about reclaiming. I reclaimed my dignity. I reclaimed my home. I reclaimed my sense of self-worth that Barbara and her children tried so hard to strip away. And slowly, day by day, I began to believe something I never thought I'd feel again after that night. That I was unbreakable. 6 months after that dinner turned nightmare, Jason and I had started to stitch our lives back together. Healing had been the first step, but now it was time to rebuild, to reinvent who we were as individuals and as a couple. Our first major decision was moving. Base housing had been convenient, but it also carried the constant reminder of Jason's family's shadow. So when a modest 3-bedroom house went up for sale 20 minutes from Fort Benning, we jumped. It wasn't the sprawling farm we dreamed of someday, but it was ours. A place untouched by betrayal, a place where we could plant new roots. The first night we moved in, Jason carried me over the threshold, grinning like a boy. "A new beginning," he whispered against my hair. And for the first time in months, I truly felt it. The house wasn't perfect, the kitchen tiles were outdated, and the backyard needed work, but we embraced every flaw. On weekends, Jason and I painted walls, planted flowers, and built a little fire pit in the yard. Each nail we hammered, each brushstroke of paint felt like an act of reclaiming, not just of space, but of ourselves. Meanwhile, my career took a turn I hadn't expected. Returning to the classroom on base, I found myself more deeply connected to the children of military families. Their resilience inspired me, and soon I was asked to co-lead a support program for kids navigating the hardships of deployments and relocations. The program grew quickly. What started as an after-school activity became a weekly class on emotional resilience, art therapy, and storytelling. Parents began thanking me, saying things like, "You've given my child a voice," and they finally feel less alone. I realized I had transformed my pain into purpose, the very thing Jason's family had tried to use to break me. My background, my ordinary career as a teacher, was what made me strong. Jason, too, was changing. Once a man who carried his family's reputation like a second skin, he began to shed it. He distanced himself from the toxic expectations of his last name and leaned into his role not just as a soldier, but as a husband. He made therapy a priority for both of us, not because he was broken, but because he wanted to build a healthier future together. I used to think being strong meant ignoring pain. He admitted one evening as we walked hand in hand through our new neighborhood. "But watching you, I've learned that strength is facing it head on." The legal fallout from his family still rippled in the background. Barbara wrote letters from therapy. Vanessa sent one cautiously apologetic note after her community service at a women's shelter. And Eric remained silent. Jason kept their words in a small box in his desk, acknowledging them but not letting them define us. For us, the focus was forward. One unexpected blessing was the military spouse support group I had joined during my darkest weeks. What had started as a place for me to vent became a place for me to lead. Laura encouraged me to co-facilitate, and before long, I was organizing meetings, creating resources, and speaking publicly about toxic family dynamics in military life. The turnout was overwhelming. At one session, a young woman approached me afterward, tears in her eyes. "I thought I was the only one dealing with in-laws who belittled me," she confessed. "Hearing your story gave me courage." It hit me then. By telling my story, I wasn't just reclaiming my own voice, I was giving others permission to find theirs. At home, Jason and I dreamed again. We talked about that small farm we always wanted, about raising chickens, growing vegetables, and someday having children who would know what real family meant, not defined by status, money, or appearances, but by love, safety, and respect. Then came the night I told him I was pregnant. I'll never forget the way his face lit up, joy spreading across his features like the sunrise. He dropped to his knees, kissed my stomach, and whispered, "We're going to give this baby the family we always dreamed of." And in that moment, I knew we weren't just rebuilding, we were reinventing. Not just surviving what had been done to us, but creating something beautiful in its place. When I look back at that night in the Williams mansion, the slap, the spit, the humiliation, I realized it could have been the end of me. Not physically, though the threat was real, but spiritually. That night could have stolen my dignity, my confidence, my belief in love and family. But it didn't. Because Jason walked through that door. Because I chose not to crumble. And because, step by step, I decided my story wasn't going to end with their cruelty. It was going to begin with my resilience. The legal process dragged on for months. And though the Williams name carried weight, the evidence was undeniable. Video footage, witness testimonies, the online smear campaign, it all came together to reveal the truth. In the end, Barbara and Vanessa accepted plea deals for assault and conspiracy. Eric faced consequences for defamation and evidence tampering. Even General Williams, though not physically violent, was forced to reckon with his complicity. Justice wasn't perfect. Their sentences were lighter than I wished, softened by wealth and reputation. But they were punished, and more importantly, the truth was public. They could no longer paint me as the liar, the manipulator, the gold digger. That was the first choice I made, choosing truth over silence. The second was even harder, choosing peace over bitterness. Forgiveness didn't come easily, and it didn't come all at once. For weeks, I felt fire in my veins every time I remembered Barbara's hand on my cheek, Vanessa's spit sliding down my face, Eric's laughter echoing. I wanted them to suffer as I had suffered. But over time, I realized that holding onto that fire only burned me. Forgiveness, I learned, isn't about excusing what they did. It's about releasing myself from their grip. So I chose to forgive, but with boundaries. Reconciliation was not on the table, not yet, maybe not ever. Forgiveness meant I could walk into my future without dragging their shadows behind me. The third choice was about identity. For so long, I had been Jason's wife, seen through the lens of his family's name and reputation. But through this ordeal, I found my own strength. I became Christina again, Christina the teacher, Christina the advocate, Christina the survivor, who turned her pain into purpose. And then came the choice that mattered most, the kind of family Jason and I would build. When I told him I was pregnant, tears filled his eyes. He held me as if holding something sacred. "This child," he whispered, "will grow up surrounded by love. Not status, not control, just love." That night, lying in bed with his hand resting gently on my stomach, I realized the Williams family had given me an unintended gift. By showing me everything family should not be, they had clarified exactly what kind of family Jason and I would create. A family where respect was given, not demanded. A family where boundaries were honored, not broken. A family where love was unconditional, not transactional. I thought of my students, the children of military families who endured distance, instability, and sacrifice. I thought of the spouses in my support group who carried silent battles with in-laws and expectations. I thought of every woman who had ever been dismissed, insulted, or diminished simply because she didn't fit someone else's mold. And I knew my story wasn't just mine anymore. It was a story for anyone who had ever been told they weren't enough. For anyone who had been humiliated by the very people who should have protected them. For anyone who needed to hear that no matter how cruel the betrayal, you can still write your own ending. That's what I had done, written my own ending. Instead of being the victim of Jason's family's narrative, I became the author of my own. Instead of being the gold digger they accused me of, I became the gold they couldn't tarnish. Now, as I sit on the porch of our new home, Jason's hand entwined with mine, I feel the quiet of evening settling around us. The stars are beginning to appear, tiny reminders that light always returns after darkness. Inside, the faint hum of the baby monitor reassures me that our newborn daughter is sleeping soundly. Her name is Grace. We chose it because it means undeserved kindness, and because her existence is proof that even after betrayal, life can bloom with beauty. I think about the family who hurt me, about Barbara, still in therapy, about Vanessa, humbled by community service, about Eric, struggling to rebuild his reputation, about General Williams, finally facing the reality that silence can be as damning as action. And I feel not anger, not even pity, just distance. They are no longer the authors of my story. They are just footnotes in the chapters of my resilience. The outcome of my journey isn't just survival, it's reinvention. It's building a family defined not by bloodlines or last names, but by choice, by love, by respect. And that's the ending I chose. Or rather, the beginning. Because my story doesn't end with what they did to me. It begins with what I chose to do next.